There you go.
Okay, so I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. This is the budget public hearing. It's a Board of Finance meeting in which the town and the Board of Education presents their budgets to us. I just want to take a minute to introduce my board. I'm Jean Fitzgerald, the chair. Judith Friedman, if you could just raise your hand, Jude. I don't think Ken Kaminsky is on. Fillmore McPherson, Justin Murphy, and John Bacard. Thank you. So Stace, I don't know if you want to open up the PowerPoint or you just want me to do it without the PowerPoint.
No, I think Lauren has it and she was going to share it.
Thank you. Okay, so you can go. I did that already. Did that? Good. So the overall budget process that happens every year is it begins in September. The town and the Board of Education work on their individual budgets throughout the fall. Then they are presented combined to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance. And now the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and Board of Ed meet combined for the education budget. Go ahead. So tonight begins the Board of Finance's role in the budget review process. We feel strongly that the public input is incredibly important. We want to hear from you. It doesn't stop at this meeting, but at least it gives us an opportunity to have the Board of Ed and the town present their budgets. The people can see them, can hear them, can ask questions, and then we will begin our Board of Finance will begin our review of the budget. And then we will, again, in the end, the bottom line is the town decides on a by vote what budget they will approve of. It's just the Board of Finance that moves it forward to the town. We begin with Board of Finance budget workshops. Board of Finance has 2 public hearings. April 28th is the next one. The Board of Finance recommends its final budget, and then the referendum is set for May 18th. After that, the Board of Finance will set the mill rate, whether or not the budget passes or it fails. And we have to go back to the drawing board and create a new budget. Okay. So tonight we're going to begin with the superintendent, Dr. Cook. He'll present the Board of Education's budget. Then we'll hand it over to our first selectwoman, Peggy Lyons. She will present the town budget, and then we will open it up for public comment. We do ask, out of respect for the amount of people that want to speak, that you leave your comments 2 minutes really for every individual would be great, so we can allow time for everyone else to speak. Again, this is not your only opportunity. We welcome emails. We welcome any kind of communication from the town to try to figure out what is really necessary, what is a priority, what is the nice to haves, what is the need to have. So we want to hear back from the town. We have, as I said, we have another public hearing in which you'll have a second opportunity to do that. But at any time, you can always reach out to the Board of Finance. If you go on the town website, there is a link for the Board of Finance emails, so you can send us an email directly. And I thank you for everyone who has already done that. So with that, I will hand it over to the new superintendent. Welcome. Be kind, it's his first presentation, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for that, Jean, and thank you to the Board of Finance for the opportunity and the public to share some information about our budget. I've been told to be relatively brief tonight, but I do know if there are questions directly for the board, feel free to email us directly. There is additional information on our website that is always available, and you can kind of track through the board's process and how we reached on the amount that was approved by the Board of Education and ultimately approved by the Board of Selectmen. And so if I could have the next slide, Lauren. Thank you. Oh, if you could go back one. Thank you. And so I'm sure the public has seen this before. This is our school vision for the 21st century education. It's been impressive, I can say, in my 3 months plus here to be able to see this in action in our schools and see our students, taking on these qualities and aspects that we look for them to achieve during their time here. There's just, as you probably are aware, a lot of project-based learning, a lot of unique opportunities that our students are receiving, even during these difficult times to be out in the public. We've certainly utilized technology very well during this time. Next slide, Lauren. And wanted to provide and start with really a high-level overview of how we arrived at the 1.4% that we are presenting tonight. It is a very lean budget. As was shared, we did start very early on prior to my start, and so thank you to our interim superintendent, Dr. Pattyfoot, who involved me pretty heavily in the process. I was fortunate to spend about a day every other week in the district after my appointment and prior to my start in December. Heavily that time was spent on the budget process, which does start earlier every year. So we started in September, really having discussions at the school level with what our needs would be for the year coming up. And so as you can see, there's some major drivers that do move the number up. Most of that is in our general education fund with a 2.3% change. Special education is a 3% change increase. School facilities, 0.7. Plan and cycle maintenance is staying flat at 0. And health insurance, really some good news in this area. It's almost a negative 3% change. And then also we have expiring debt service that decreases by 3%. All that totals up to 1.4% change. In the far right column, we'll show you just briefly what those categories, what their increase contributes to that 1.4%. So if you add those up on the right-hand column, it equals the 1.4%. The administration had presented a 1.9% budget to the Board of Education, and through work and also some additional funding that we received through grants and really having some additional time to look into the budget, we were able to reduce that even further to the 1.4%. So a lot of work has gone into this, and looking at really every account along the way. Next slide, please. Next is really just a pie chart to show what I just shared in a different way. To really bring it out, and show that like our debt service is decreasing, our health insurance is decreasing, special ed and personnel are really the big pieces that lead us to the increase where we are today. Next slide, please. In terms of a little bit more detail of what this is, most of the increase is related to personnel and benefits. If we did nothing related to our contracts, it's about $600,000 increase. And so that's related to increases based on contractual agreements with our bargaining unit. Most of the school budget is related to personnel. And so that's where that figure comes from. But as the public is aware, our enrollment at Daniel Hand is decreasing. For the most part, the rest of the district is relatively flat, but at our high school, we are seeing a decrease in our enrollment, and following that through, we are decreasing positions to reflect that decreased enrollment. And we'll show that a little bit later in a future slide. We felt it was very important to continue security specialists that were added this year. So now each one of our buildings is staffed at all times either by a security specialist or by a school resource officer. So our excellent relationship with the Madison Police Department continues, and we have an officer in each of our campuses at all times. We, related to COVID, made a move to go towards building-based substitutes, and what that is that we have a substitute teacher that goes into each building every day, and that's where they report. And rather than have daily subs that may have been subbing in a different district or in a different location the day before, we wanted to maintain a consistent staff as much as possible. We do feel we'll be dealing with the effects of COVID-19 for next school year. And we've also found that this is a better service model, and it's better for our students and teachers. Benefits, non-related to health insurance, are going up $53,000. And then there's 2 personnel changes. We would add a math interventionist to Daniel Hand High School, which does not have one currently, and that's somebody that will work directly with students who need the most math support on a scheduled basis. And then also a technology support specialist, which would address and work with our additional technology. We've added over 1,000 devices, and that will continue on even further for next year. And so it's we're at a point where we cannot have technology down, where we cannot have issues that need to be addressed. And so this would add to support that work, that additional workload. Next slide, please. So as I shared, the best positive news in terms of the budget, without really major changes to the health insurance plan, we are saving $222,000 based on good experience, some changes to contractual agreements, and just a decreased number of employees that are on our health insurance due to decreases in the FTE count. And so that has provided us with a pretty significant savings that we put towards the final line of the budget. Next slide. In terms of other pieces in the operating budget, I know one of the 2 of the big pieces that was shared with me coming into the district that was a significant area of need was additional technology in the classrooms. And so we had really caught up in a fast manner, going one-to-one with devices for this school year. But then in terms of the technology that teachers have in the classrooms, and this would apply whether we are in distance or all in, we were inconsistent, I would say, and somewhat outdated in a lot of areas. And so this would bring our entire district's core classrooms, which is science, social studies, English, and math, up to really cutting edge, in a good place. They'd be interactive boards, which is basically looks like a large TV in a classroom, but students can project to the boards. They can do interactive activities, and then if there are students that are online, they can project as well, and they can be seen on the board. And so it's teacher can project obviously too, and bring in videos and new technology, do experiments. And so it's really cutting edge. We received a grant for Polson and Brown that will bring about $200,000 into those schools for interactive boards. But to bring our entire district up to speed, this would be a 5-year lease for $102,000 per year. As well as something else that was mentioned to me quite frequently was additional security for our buildings. I think the personnel piece and the personnel moves that I discussed just earlier is the number one efforts that we should be making in terms of security. But there are always needs that beyond that, for cameras, for fobs for the buildings, which would be basically electronic keys for the building, and also some lock, new door locks that would be, updating the buildings as well and making them safer. So that's something we'd always be looking at. We're incredibly thankful that there's $75,000 as well in the CIP program. So it's $150,000 each year that would, going forward, that would go towards additional security measures. Next slide, Lauren. This is one I know you're probably seen before, and it's tracking, and it has been for several years, our enrollment drop, and then also how that's reflected in our staffing changes. And so as I mentioned before, we would decrease staffing at Daniel Hand based on the drop in enrollment. That's really where we'll see that drop for next year. And as you look over the years, we're down about 1,200 students, a little bit over 1,200 students, but we're also down 75 staff members. And we're looking forward to, I think this probably won't come as a surprise to the town, where we've pretty much been at that, I would say probably the bottom of our enrollment, and we'll start to see increases coming in the future based on housing stock turnover and some new development, but a lot of new families moving into town that we're seeing. We also are expecting to have the vast majority of the students that left us this year, whether that was selecting homeschool or maybe even going to private school, will be coming back. Our principals at the elementary level in particular have been contacting those families and been hearing that they're wanting to return. We've even had some return this week, as things get better, I think in our state and our town with the COVID pandemic. And our last slide is showing the history. And so as you can see, over the past 5 years, and even before that, has been very financially conservative in terms of board increases. These numbers really reflect us just barely, kind of staying up with where we have been, in terms of funding. There is a 2019, 2020 is reflective of a school building closes, so there's certainly some savings that were related to that. But I feel the board has been very financially conservative over the years. What's great about this budget is it is increasing some new pieces. So there are some exciting pieces in this budget that we'd be moving forward with technology and security, and we're appreciative of the support we've received from the boards in the town in the past. That completes my presentation. I look forward to any questions, and I believe my next task is to introduce First Selectman Peggy Lyons, who's going to bring us through the town budget.
Good evening, everybody. Hold on a second. I actually have mine on my computer here, so give me a second. And we'll once again. It's not giving me this. Here we go. All right. All right, great. Thank you. So just want to welcome everybody, and thank you, Craig, for a very helpful and quick. Mine's going to be a little longer. People are used to me taking a little while longer. So first of all, I just want to introduce, I think all my board is here tonight. We've worked well as a team, I think, throughout this year, both on the budget, but just also working through a lot of operational challenges that the town has seen. And I know the schools have experienced with COVID. Our goals this year were really to focus on a couple of major priorities, including public safety, technology, public works, beach staffing, and I think you'll see that throughout the budget. We also want to position us for what's going to be the post-COVID environment that we're going to be living in. As more and more people get vaccinated, we're hoping that we'll be in a somewhat normal year by July, although it'll still take, another year or two. But we also have to know that we learned things from COVID and how town government was operating. And so we've had to adjust to that. And we're going to need to start investing in some new services and offerings to the community because of what we've learned through COVID. And then we've also implemented some organizational changes to improve operational efficiencies and enhance programs and realize some longer term cost savings. And that includes the merger of two departments, Beach and Recreation and Senior Services, and also just redeploying staff to make sure they're being used more efficiently across departments. We've recommending funding CIP adequately to support immediate needs, but we also recognize we don't want to make decisions in silos. And so we're launching a facilities master planning process, and we deferred and delayed a number of capital projects so that we could look at things more holistically. And then I think also some of this relates to the schools. So until we kind of solve the capital needs of the schools, it really makes it difficult for the town to move forward on some other project and initiatives that it wants to launch. And also, we're also very obviously concerned and aware of the impact that these budgets have on the taxpayer. So we've tried to be very mindful and conservative as we've reviewed this and keep costs down as much as possible. Just reflecting, I talked a little bit about this at the town meeting, the state of town earlier, that COVID has had a big impact on town operations. And so I think this budget reflects some of the priorities that we felt, as I mentioned before: public safety, public works, beach staffing. And I also think we need to remember that last year, this meeting was held in person at Polson, and within, I think, 2 weeks or 10 days, we were going into a state of emergency. So when the board recommended a budget last year, it was forward-thinking, policy-driven, and problem-solving. And then we hit this incredible experience that, a pandemic that really had to alter the way we looked at things. And so both the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen, had suggested some reductions from the original recommended budgets, in understanding what the significant economic challenge we were going to be facing possibly this year, and a lot of uncertainty. The Board of Finance, took some actions to pare down and focus on core services just to see where we were going to go. And so that was kind of where, and then people didn't get to vote on the budget. It was something that, because of the situation, the Board of Finance approved. And so I think, we prepared the town to kind of work through the next 6 to 12 months and think through about our spending habits and what resources we needed and what the community needed. And so now I think this new budget for next year is forward thinking again, but learning from what we just encountered and what we just experienced. So here's the snap, high level view of the total budgets. And as you can see, we're recommending a total town budget of roughly $29.2 million, with an increase of 4.29%. And I'll talk on the next slide a little bit about how this increase is relative to previous years. The education budget, as Dr. Cook just talked through, was 1.4%, and this kind of pulled together represents a total budget increase of 2.34%, which is roughly in line with what the average has been over the last 10 years for the town, which rounds out to about 2.2% for the 10-year average. And then just looking at, what this is on a percent increase, because I know everybody's concerned about budget growth. It highlights, once again, I think that the recommended budget is actually slightly below what was approved last year through the process, both the operating budget and the town budget. And the overall budget is just slightly above what was approved last year, which was under extraordinary circumstances by the environment that we were in. So I feel like we've been very mindful and tried to stay in line with some of the philosophy and concerns that we had last year when these budgets moved forward. Noted, we were fortunate to offer taxpayers, zero mill rate growth last year. And that was a combination of lowering the budget and then using some of the tools that the Board of Finance is able to do to keep the taxes down as much as possible to give citizens relief. People were very concerned about what the future was going to hold for them, where the economy was going. And so we were fortunate to be in a financial position to do that. And the board was able to tap into reserve accounts and really make some adjustments to offer that. So this next year, if you take the budget rolling forward and apply some of those skills again, it would imply a 2.15% mill rate increase, which is still below, previous year's mill rate increases. And really the 10-year average, I think, is around 2%. So it's roughly in the long-term range that, we've seen in Madison. So what is driving this $1.2 million budget increase? And if you look at it, almost 40% of this is focused on public safety needs. The police capture about 15% of the wage increase, the total increase, and the ambulance is another 25%, the ambulance services. We had a new police contract come out this year. Our police were far behind their peers in terms of their pay. And so we worked hard to come up with something that we thought was fair and also reflected the incredible demands that we have on our police force, especially over this last year, as we've all seen. They stepped up incredibly. And then the ambulance service continues to struggle with the revenue model. And, we all understand how important our ambulance service is. They've done a great job serving us through this whole health crisis that we've experienced. And so in order to continue to staff adequately and retain staff, the town is going to have to continue to provide more funding to maintain services. And we've seen that creep up quite a bit over the last couple of years. Another piece that's driving this increase is the library. And, the library over a period of years, kind of had a reduced budget to adjust for the fact that they were in transition. They were moved to a small space while the construction of the library was happening. So their budget shrank a bit for a couple of years. And then in addition to that, last year, even though the building was technically completed and they were open, they couldn't really open. And so, last May, the Board of Finance, cognizant that it was unclear how the library was going to open up for the next year, kept their budget at a certain level. So I think now is the time to kind of move forward, reflect that the library, we're hopeful July 1 will be open for the public to use. And so we need to get them back funding needed so they can have their doors open on a regular basis and provide services to the community. And then the other areas that are driving this are capital, which we have had a couple of different things that really needed to, we needed to beef up our capital accounts, and then debt service. So, so this is just a little deeper dive for somebody who's interested in terms of kind of where the areas of the budget increase were coming from, with the actual dollar amounts, but it pretty much summarizes on the next day, but this is a nice walkthrough explaining some of this. And I pulled out beach and recreation just to explain that last year we went to a 5-day-a-week staffing model in order to kind of economize, not really understanding or being able to forecast what a crazy summer it was going to end up being for us. We managed to scramble, and we were able to provide staffing 7 days a week. The Beach and Rec Department had a lot of savings in other areas because we weren't doing all our normal programming and operations. But I think the Board of Selectmen, and I know many feel that the community expects to have full staffing 7 days a week at the beaches, lifeguards, gate guards, the whole thing. So that was one thing I did want to point out. And then obviously I talked about the public safety contracts. And then I also wanted just to highlight that we've been fortunate because we actually have saved money in healthcare, which is unusual, as well as our pensions. So this was a year that we didn't really have to worry. The town is self-funded with its healthcare program, and that served us very well over the last probably 10 years. In terms of staffing, because I know a lot of people are always concerned about staffing, and I will just say that we've had a lot going on this year because of reorganization. And so there's been kind of ins and outs. There's a lot more detail below this, where we've added some full-time positions, we've reduced some people to part-time, we've added some additional hours. We've moved people from one department into another. So this is kind of trying to reflect a little bit what those overall staffing changes had been. But the net change overall for this year is an increase of 0.25 FTEs, so full-time equivalents. So, so I know when we hear about, some of the positions that we've requested in land use, or other departments, like I said, there's been some pluses in one category and minuses in the other. And there's a lot behind this in each department with changes going on. Capital funding, basically, we really tried to focus on what really needed to be done over the next year, recognizing that we have a lot of long-term needs. One of the big surprises we had this year was in our vehicle replacements for Public Works. So a lot of our big trucks, we had a consultant come in and review our entire fleet. And they advocated and strongly recommended that we replace a number of our large, very expensive vehicles. They're just old, need a lot of repairs, and we need to get ourselves more on a regular replacement cycle for our fleet. So we're recommending increasing funding significantly to allow for that replacement cycle to accelerate. And so we made some amendments to CIP after the committee met. And then other areas we have increases are in like technology, which I think we all recognize is something we're relying a lot more heavily on. Some things from emergency management, communications, and then some of the larger projects, are really going to be contingent on, let me go back to this. I can't see my own slides. I'm moving the boxes around, so I apologize. So in terms of some of the big projects that people are interested in, a lot of these are in the CIP plan. Downtown Center project, we've requested funding for completion of phase 1, which is bringing the poles down, and then trying to plan for a re-envision phase 2. The school plan is still there. And so we're kind of pending the decision on that before we can make other kinds of long-term facility decisions for the schools. Academy is also on hold for this facilities master plan. We just had a presentation on Monday, the board did, by our consultant who is doing an entire review of all town facilities. The surf club, we know we have some longer term planning that needs to be done there. We've put off a lot of renovation and improvement projects there in order to make sure we look at them holistically and come up with a actual, vision for the future of what we want the surf club to be. Island Avenue, the lease was renewed by our first virtual town meeting. And, we continue to collect $400,000 a year in rent. That lease expires next July in 2022. And so we're in the process of trying to determine its future, and hopefully we can take an option to the public for a public vote about the future of that building. The town fleet I mentioned, and then I know the firehouse downtown. I think this has to be all discussed in the context of our overall facilities master plan. And then just a number of other projects that we've delayed pending the planning process and the bonding referendum. Another thing that the board has recommended is specific special appropriations. We're all aware that, the town is in a great position right now because of our conservative fiscal management, that we have a significant cash reserve right now. And so I know the Board of Finance has been spending a lot of time thinking about how to use that prudently. And so the board identified a few things that were initially in the budget, but really were non-recurring. These aren't things that you necessarily are going to expect to see year over year. And so we're making a recommendation that some of these things get pulled out as special appropriations to the Board of Finance to get funded that way. And then there's a number of other things that could be considered by them. And I know they've already had one meeting to talk about this, and they'll be speaking a lot more about this, but setting us up for the future by using those reserves, to just get ahead of things. Because especially if we do end up having any kind of bonding referendum approved over the next year or two, we want to keep taxes down and have adequate funds available to reduce the impact on taxpayers. So, and so really that's kind of the final point here, is that, we think this is a very responsible budget that hits on a number of key priorities. It's in line with historically with where town budgets have gone in terms of what people's expectations are. And so we think that the town will be well served by all of the programs and services and requests that we've made in this budget. And
Thank you, Peggy. I appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Cook, also for your time. I appreciate it. So what we'll do now is turn it over to the public for questions. When Lauren, you'll be in charge of pulling people into opening up their mics. If you could identify yourself, give your address, and then perhaps if you could say who your question is directed to, that would be helpful, whether it's the first selectwoman or the superintendent. Okay, Lauren, I'll turn it to you. Any questions, Lauren? So I'm assuming there's no questions. Lauren, nothing? I don't see anything in the chat.
Lauren, you're muted.
All right, well, I don't see anything in the chat either, so if there's any questions from my board of Finance to the Board of Selectmen or Board of Ed,
Hey,
we'll
Jane,
start to review those. Yes, Stacy.
Lauren just texted me that her computer froze.
Oh, okay. Can you see the questions if there's any?
I
don't see anything in the,
All right, let me
chat.
ask her.
I see Gus Horvath has his hand raised.
Oh, cuss.
I think I would have been surprised if he hadn't asked a question, so. So I don't know how to bring them. I
Yeah.
can't bring them up.
Yeah, if you can hold on, Peggy, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on mute and try to call Lauren to see if there's anything I could do to help.
Okay, I think because she's the host, unless she shares her host with me, then I can unmute him.
And Gus could always type something in the chat if he wanted to. at
Yeah,
least.
thank you. If there's anyone else that has questions while we wait for Lauren, if you can, if you want to either put them in the chat or you can email them to the Board of Finance and we'll make sure they get to the correct people.
So Lauren just said her whole computer froze, so she's gonna try to go on her cell phone and swap myself to being the host so that I can read any questions. So if you give us
Okay.
one more minute, we'll try it that way.
Perfect. I apologize for the technical difficulties to the public.
I think this is the first time this has ever happened, actually. With all the meetings that Lauren has hosted, I don't think her computer's ever frozen during one of our meetings, so.
Stacy, can you ask Lauren, I think the host also has the chat disabled.
Yep.
The YouTube, I think, will allow for questions. Let's see if but I think she's still the host of that.
Jane, there are some questions. I don't know if you saw them on there. I don't know if they want anything answered, but on the Q&A.
Yes, I do see one. If you, is that Joan Walker, John, that you're talking
That is
about?
correct. That is correct. I just saw it pop up. Maybe they can email, maybe they can just put the questions in there and we can answer them.
Yeah. Do you want me to read it out loud?
Yeah, please do.
Please.
That would be great.
Okay,
Sorry.
this is from Joan Walker, 39 Stepping Stone Lane. I want to state that I am in favor of the budgets as presented and hope the Board of Finance approves as is.
Thank you.
Say thanks. previous.
Good?
That's the only one I see so far. I think Lauren's still
Yeah.
trying with herself.
Is there any way we can let everybody else know if they can just type it
Everybody
in?
can, John. That's what I said. They can, if they want to,
Okay.
they can put them in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's what
we'll
you said
just-
before. Yep.
Yeah, so we'll just wait and see if anybody does. And if anyone can't, then absolutely please send an email. And we'll make sure your answers get sent to you.
I'll ask a question if that's okay while we're waiting.
Yep, go ahead, Justin.
Not just trying to fill time, but a quick question for Dr. Cook. During your presentation, you mentioned the reduction in headcount, you know, kind of as the enrollment has declined, particularly at hand. Were those net reductions or just gross? Or were those net of any additions? Or are they in different, you know, various categories, if you can address that?
Those are net throughout the entire district, so all over the district. But more recently, the decreased student enrollment has hit hand, and will continue to for a few more years.
So that includes, like, that's kind of all grouped together, like teachers and paras and staff, or is it just relate to one particular category?
Correct. It's teachers and paras. It does not include special ed count, because we have increased special ed students, and so it kept the special ed count. That's how they presented it in the past.
Okay, so teachers and paras. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I also have a question for the superintendent, if I may. Thank you for your presentation. I do recall that after you came up with your budget, you have received notification of a grant, a federal grant, I believe, of $344,000 that would cover, I think, at least some of the items that were in your budget. I wondered how that relates.
Sure. So the grant we received, it's throughout, you know, the country really, but Connecticut has received support from the federal government for reopening schools under COVID. We did close, but, you know, in terms of we were distanced, and then you know, as we open up, you know, fully, and how as we open up for next year, this is really meant to accelerate and to provide intervention for students needing it for next year. And so that's what our plan is to target. It was shared with the board, you know, from the state. You know, the state shared this with us basically the day before we were to submit the budget. So the board had already set its budget, and then we received the information on the funding for that. And so I'm working with administrators now to determine how we best can meet our students' needs for intervention. I mean, if you think of our first graders, the majority of their time in schools have been, you know, COVID impacted versus not. And so we know we have, you know, some ground to make up, in particular our youngest learners, because they are most impacted by being online and having disruption. And so we were looking at really, you know, interventionists in terms of language arts, and bringing up, you know, their support for reading. And then in terms of other pieces, we expect, as I shared, increased enrollment. And so part of that grant I would see going towards additional classroom teachers for our K-3 schools for next year. And I shared with the board last night, you know, this is a situation, if I did not use the grant funding for that, very likely would have to come back to the board when we know our enrollment for next year, and have to ask for additional funding for classroom teachers. Because I shared, you know, kindergarten numbers were down this year. We expect them to rebound pretty significantly for next year. And then also for students to show up in first grade that have been somewhere else for this year. So about $120,000, $130,000 of that grant specifically would go towards 2 additional teachers, just for classroom, you know, to keep class sizes low. I think the government, you know, recognizes that there's going to be still a significant impact for next school year. I mean, we have a an optimistic view of how things will look, but, you know, we know there's going to be, you know, an impact. The other piece, we're looking at social emotional, you know, support for our students, you know, that we have not seen some of our students since March, and so last March. And so we're not sure, you know, how that's going to be for them kind of coming back into the school buildings and being back in classrooms and how we move forward. So we know we need to do, you know, a lot of support in that area too.
Craig, I just had a question from the public. Matt Gordon asked, is the
Sure.
location-based substitute plan adequate for the needs?
We think so. You know, we've done a lot of covering this year. You know, we hope not to do so much next year, but you know, it's certainly worked and been a better scenario. In these are kind of the short-term absences. You know, so if a teacher's out long-term, we hire a you know, a certified teacher to come in and fill in for that person. But these are really the, you know, kind of day-to-day absences, and so that person would show up to Polson Middle School every morning and be put in a different classroom depending on, you know, a teacher that may be out. And so it's really worked well for this school year, and you know, we hope to continue that in that manner for next school year.
Thank you. Peggy, I had a question. Is your numbers that you've included here, including the 673 from the undesignated fund balance that we haven't talked about yet?
Yes, that is. That's assuming
Yeah,
that.
so I just want to be clear, the Board of Finance has not decided on that,
Right.
and I don't want, because the
It
numbers.
is footnoted in the presentation.
Yeah, so it could be just in case the people
Yeah.
didn't see the footnote, that's a little misleading. So I just want to be clear that the number that you're talking about includes an offset that the Board of Finance has not discussed in detail yet. So I just want to be clear to the public that and go back, if people look at the slides, that wouldn't be 100% accurate. The other thing is, you had said, and just clarify, I could be wrong, the last 10 years you said was 2.34 is what you're at now, because the last 10 years was 2.18.
Are you talking compounded annual growth or average change?
The last 10 years of the average change.
Okay, I'll go back because I might be quoting 10 compounded annual growth. I'm going off of some numbers I'd done last year. From my
Yeah,
previous-
I just want to be clear to
Yeah.
make sure that, and again, the 673 is something the Board of Finance is discussing, and I'm sure
Yeah.
we are using it. But I just want to be clear, I don't want the public to be misled in any way, and you did footnote it, so I just, in case people didn't see the footnote, I just wanted to make that clear. And I think that's all that I had. Anyone else? Gus, I know you said you just wanted to say hi, so hi, Gus. Anyone else, any questions?
We have Lauren back.
Hi, Lauren.
Yay.
That's never happened before.
I know.
No problem, but
I have a
thank you.
housekeeping question. Stacy, can we come by and get a copy of these two presentations? in
Absolutely.
Another day or two?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can actually post the complete presentation on the website as well, Fillmore.
Okay.
Or we could email it to you, or we could have a hard copy ready for you as well.
Elmore, we could drop it off your house too if you need it.
That would be good, along with the DoorDash for the next.
Yeah,
time we
we'll
go
get you
out to
some dinner too. I'm sure
There you
that's in the
go.
budget, right, Peggy?
Exactly.
Okay, so
I'll come
if
by,
there
Stacy.
are no, if there are no other questions, does it look quiet, Lauren?
No one else has their hand raised.
Okay, I would encourage the public, as I said in the beginning, this is the beginning of the Board of Finance process and I thank everyone who has already participated. We have been inundated with emails, and I appreciate that. And I hope to see that continue so we can hear from the public. I also want to remind you, on the 28th, I believe, of April, we're having another public hearing. So that's another opportunity for the public to kind of take some time now, delve into the budget a little bit, ask some questions, and then we can have another discussion on the 28th publicly. Our meetings are public. They're on the third Tuesday of every month, correct, Stace? Get my right dates?
I'm not sure, but the calendar is posted as well. I don't know if it's
Right.
agreed.
I think the next one's the 9th. March
9th.
9th.
So what I'm hoping is, remember that these are public meetings. We always have public comment. So it's another opportunity for the public to let the Board of Finance know what they're thinking. And that will help us in terms of our discussion moving forward. And if there are no other questions, Lauren, I'm clear.
You're good.
Okay, I will thank everyone for coming tonight and look forward to our next meeting.